Welcome everyone to one of our most popular webinars of the year, Potty Training for Special Needs. I am Sylvia Lamb. I'm the Executive Director for United Angels Foundation, and I am very pleased to introduce our speaker today, Aubrey Zaruba, who is a child development specialist leader from Kids on the Move. She has a ton of experience working with children and families and is an expert in potty training. So we're so happy to have Aubrey here, and I will go ahead and pass everything off to Aubrey.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be with you all again. I don't know if any of you have been here in the past for the potty training webinar. As Sylvia mentioned, I'm Aubrey Zaruba. I'm with Kids on the Move full time as a child development specialist, and I've been there for also a long time. Um, and it's been such a privilege to be able to come and speak with the United Angels Foundation. I will say, if you've been here in the past, this presentation will look incredibly familiar to you because unfortunately, there's not really a lot of new information with regards to potty training. I wish that we had some magic wand now to help us potty train our kids, but that's just not the case. So, if you have been here before and heard this information, I hope you'll still find it helpful. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask. We will have time for questions at the end. But if you have anything you want to say throughout, feel free to go ahead and unmute. Sylvia will be monitoring the chat. I'll do my best if I happen to see something pop up with the screen share with the PowerPoint showing on the screen. I'm not always able to see chats, but if you have things that you want to post in the chat, feel free. If we can all just keep ourselves muted unless you have something to say, that will just help the quality of the sound to be a little bit better. As we dive in, we're going to be talking about potty training with the emphasis on trying to potty train our children with special needs, as sometimes there's, it takes a little bit of sometimes it takes a little bit of um extra efforts or extra patience on all of our parts in order to accomplish that. So, as we move forward in our slides, I'm just going to show you where this information came from. And most of it is kind of coming from a couple of curriculum sources. One being there's a child development curriculum called Ahead. And so a lot of the information comes from there. There's also the Love and Logic curriculum that some of you may be familiar with. And a lot of it just comes from anecdotal experiences of working with kids for over 20 years. I'm going to start creeping closer to 25 here soon. I think I have another year or two before I hit 25 years of professionally working with kids, but it's been a long time. And in addition to that, just kind of personal experiences with potty training. And I think that we kind of want it and wish it to be kind of easy and cut and dry and super straightforward. And it's not always that way. So let's dive in and kind of talk about first things first. Where do we start? Before we really dive into any specific techniques or strategies, the first thing I always like to evaluate, and if we want to advance the slide, we can advance to, and maybe we had a little technology.
We do. We have a little technology. It's coming back. Sorry,
Okay,
guys.
perfect. No, that's no problem. Um, we'll just go ahead and keep talking. It's not necessarily something that's critical for you to see. So as our technology gets back, we'll be able to catch up to where we are. But as I was saying, the very first thing I like to talk about is readiness. And that's not just the readiness of the child. In fact, I like to talk about the parent or caregiver readiness as a big part of that conversation. So, do you have the time? Potty training takes time, and we need to kind of be aware of that and acknowledge that up front. Do you have the patience? How realistic are your expectations when it comes to potty training your child?
Ooh,
Are we in a space where we have the patience to be able to actually work through this? Are you prepared for child independence? Are you prepared for your child to kind of have a little bit more of that control and independence of their toileting needs? Um, And sometimes they might be potty trained, but still that independence might be kind of hard for us. And then finally, are you set up for success? So those are some of the things I like for parents to kind of think about before we even start looking at child readiness. As we think about ourselves, where are we at in our own life with kids, family, home, work, outside, other pressures or things we have going on? Do we actually have the capacity to start tackling potty training? And if the answer is yes, then we can start, diving into some of these other things. The child readiness factors are also very important. I firmly believe if kids are not ready and if we're not ready, it's not going to go well. So I like to set us up for success. So, looking at bladder control, is the child staying dry for several hours at a time? Are they waking up dry after a nap or eventually at night? Um, if they're not waking up dry, that doesn't mean we can't introduce potty training. It's just going to be really hard to be fully potty trained. And we may need diapers for sleeping time. And then we can be, trained during our waking hours, but it's something to consider with the bladder control. And are they acknowledging that they have a wet diaper and or a need to urinate? Oftentimes kids will notice either their need for a bowel movement or they'll notice the need to have a diaper change when they've had a bowel movement before sort of urinating in their diaper. But it's also something to consider as we think about potty training. Are they starting to notice that? And then we look at their bowel control as well. Are their bowel movements on some type of schedule? It doesn't mean it has to be like, okay, it's every day at 10:30, but do we kind of notice a pattern of like, okay, typically after breakfast they have a bowel movement, or it's oftentimes in the mid-afternoon, that sort of a thing. Are we noticing certain things like stopping to play, hiding, going to a specific place to have a bowel movement? Do they acknowledge a need for a diaper change or a need to have a bowel movement? Sometimes they may not be able, like maybe you're seeing some of the stopping their play or going to hide, and you may ask them, do you need to go to the bathroom? Do you need your diaper change? And they may tell you no, but you're seeing it every time. Like every day, you're kind of seeing them going behind the couch or running into the other room or things like that. So they maybe haven't connected it together, but you might be seeing the pattern. So the next slide is gonna the slide we're on right now. The previous slide. I just hadn't looked up properly. Um, so emotional readiness and self-care readiness are also important. If we have kind of evaluated the bladder and bowel control and we don't think they really are showing those signs, then we're probably not ready to evaluate these next things. So I kind of put them in this order on purpose. So their emotional readiness. Are they complaining about wet or dirty diapers, as I just mentioned? Do they anticipate the need to go before it happens? And sometimes you'll notice they start telling you they need to go and they've just gone. So that's also a sign that they're recognizing, even though it's a little late, it's still a sign on that readiness checklist. Are they noticing the difference between clean and not clean? Not specifically just to the diaper, but just in general. Are they able to kind of notice, like, for example, a dish, like a bowl or a plate or something? Do they know the difference between a clean plate, a dirty plate, and like in the dishwasher if the dishes are clean, and can they see like, oh yeah, the dishes are clean, we're gonna take them out, or oh, I see, food all over the dishes. They're dirty. They're not ready to come out. Do they like to be independent and do things for themselves? Oftentimes we notice that desire for independence long before we're ready for potty training, but it is an important thing to think about. And then we're going to also look at self care readiness. What are some things that they are able to be independent with? Are they helping with dressing and undressing? And more than helping, how how helpful are they? Especially with pants, skirts, shorts, whatever they're kind of wearing on the bottom. How independent are they able to pull those things down, pull them back up? Are they helping with hand washing? Are they drinking from a cup for most of their liquids? Drinking an 8-ounce bottle makes it a lot harder to stay dry. So if they're still drinking from a bottle quite a bit, we might not be quite ready. So these are some, big things. The next slide is going to talk about communication readiness. And that's something I hear from parents a lot. I'm seeing some of the signs that they might be ready, but I don't think we can do it because they don't have a way to communicate with me. And that is an important thing to think about. So before we even talk about are they speaking or using a sign or gesture, I like to look at how are they understanding? What's their receptive language like? What's their understanding of words? Are they following simple directions, such as pull up your pants, sit down on the toilet, turn on the water, turn off the water, get the toilet paper, flush the toilet? Those are all like things that are associated with potty training, but even just thinking in general, are they doing things like go throw this away, get your diaper, wear your shoes, that sort of thing? Can they imitate simple actions? It's going to be as simple as clapping, waving, other simple actions, just not clapping, but even just bringing hands together, maybe like folding arms, touching nose, patting head, different things like that. Do they understand the difference between wet and dry? We just talked about clean and dirty. So same thing, wet and dry. This, and again, not just with regards to the diaper, but just in general. We get out of the tub or shower, our bodies are wet. We use our towel, now we're dry. We might come in from the snow and our shoes are wet, although we don't obviously have a lot of snow right now, but I think we will maybe sometime in the next little bit. Um, so our shoes are wet, then we're going to take our shoes off, but our feet are dry inside. Are they able to sit for at least 5 minutes? Um, the reason for that is so that they can sit on the toilet long enough to be able to have a complete bowel movement. This is again not like can they sit on the toilet for 5 minutes, but just can they sit somewhere for 5 minutes? Um, And then do they respond to praise for their accomplishments? So those are some of the understanding pieces. The next slide is going to talk about their actual expressive communication. So are they using gestures, signs, pictures, or words to communicate? Do we have a communication system? Um, and then do they have a specific strategy to communicate the need to go to the bathroom? Like, again, whether that's a verbal word, a sign, a picture, a gesture, whatever it is you're trying to work on with that, how mastered is that? And if we don't have that, then again, we're not quite ready, but it's something we can work on. And then motor readiness is also important to evaluate. So have they been walking and stooping for about 6 months to a year? Oftentimes, if kids have just started walking, they're not quite ready for potty training success. Are they able to pick up small objects? The reason for that indicates overall readiness just with their motor development. So it's not that we need to pick up small objects as part of the toileting process, but it's just kind of indicative that as a whole, our motor skills are ready for potty training. So those are the readiness signs that is for me step number 1 to evaluate all of these readiness factors and kind of determine, are we ready to even consider doing this? And I think it's really important to be really honest with ourselves because sometimes we see one or two of the readiness signs and we think, okay, I think we're ready. We're going to start it. That's totally fine. You can. I just find that if they're not ready, it doesn't work out and it becomes a control issue. And ultimately, they get to be in control, which we'll talk about later. Okay, now we're going to move on to, and as I've said, if anyone has any comments or questions, feel free to pipe in. But now that we're all ready, let's actually get ready. So we've decided, yeah, I think I'm ready. Mom, dad, whoever, caretakers, we're ready. We have the patience, we have the time, we have all these readiness skills. We've looked at the child, we've had some conversations with the parents and caretakers, and we all decide, yeah, I think so. I think we're ready. So before we actually start, let's get ourselves ready. I like to use a chart to track patterns for a week or two before starting, just so I kind of know again when are those predictable bowel movement patterns and where are we seeing dryness versus wetness? How often is the diaper dry as opposed to a little bit wet so that we can kind of look at patterns and things like that. The next thing I want to have is I want to be prepared with whatever supplies I need. I really like a reward system. Kind of in general, I'm very pro reward systems, but for potty training specifically, I think rewards work well. I also like to have some smaller and some bigger things. If you like, you can use treats. That's 100% a personal decision. Stickers, sometimes food coloring in the toilet water can make it kind of fun if we turn the toilet water blue or we turn the toilet water orange or a fun color that can be motivating to sit on the potty and attempt to go. Some little toys, some one-on-one time can be a reward at times if the child would respond well to that. Things like a sticker chart, stickers, cotton balls, like all that kind of stuff. And we want to be prepared with some underwear. They do have some kind of training pants or training underwear. Then they also just have, the regular toddler underwear. If your child's a little bit older, you might have to look into something that's still going to be a little more absorbent than just your everyday underwear. Um, and then be ready to move into, kind of your everyday underwear once we're to that point where we're getting more success, feeling more confident. I have pull-ups question mark because they are more convenient because if they do have an accident, then it's still a diaper. However, it's still a diaper, so sometimes kids treat it like a diaper. They are more convenient, but I don't think they're necessarily more helpful. One thing I like to do if I'm using pull-ups or recommending use of pull-ups is to put the underwear on first and then the pull-up over the top. So if there is an accident, we do still have the underwear that need to be cleaned up, but the accident is still kind of contained in the pull-up rather than the pants or the carpet floor or the couch that they're sitting on or the car seat that they're in. So it allows them to feel the sensation of, oops, I had an accident. Or sometimes kids will start to go a little bit and they'll feel it and they'll catch themselves. So again, then we do have the underwear that we need to, kind of clean up, but we don't have, it's not as big of a mess, I feel. So I'm not and I mean it's totally personal. If you want to use pull-ups, like by all means, go ahead. But I kind of tend to steer away from them as just sort of like a transition to underwear because there's and they're not quite as absorbent as a typical diaper, but they are still, for all intents and purposes, they're still a diaper. We might need a step stool. Kids might have a hard time climbing up onto the adult sized toilet. So sometimes we need a step stool. The more independent we can help them to be, the more success we'll have down the road. And then the next thing is a potty seat. Again, this is an optional personal thing. I have mixed feelings kind of about the toilet inserts or the child-sized potty seat. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with either one. The only complication is once you're out and about, if you don't have their potty seat or their mini toilet, sometimes they won't want to go. I have one of my good friends was potty training her daughter last week, and she had everything, all the readiness signs. In fact, she even like the day before, she just out of the blue told her mom that she wanted to go potty. They weren't planning on potty training at the moment, but because she said it, they were like, okay, well, I guess we're potty training you. And she was doing really well at home for a couple days, and then they went to grandma's house and they forgot the potty seat. And she was pretty resistant to going in grandma's potty because it was too big. And again, there's nothing wrong with using the insert, and sometimes using the insert into the toilet allows a child to be more independent, because sometimes if they're just using the regular toilets, we have to help them so that they're not kind of, falling into the toilet depending on how small they are. So again, this is personal decision whether or not, and ultimately this little girl can hold it for quite a long time. And eventually she decided she actually needed to go potty, and she used grandma's potty. So it is absolutely possible. Um, and likely to be just fine. Okay, so now let's talk about what type of approaches do we have. We've decided we have all the readiness. Check, check, check. We've gotten ourselves prepared. We've gathered our supplies. We've decided whether or not, like, what type of underwear, pull ups or not, potty seats, all of that. Now let's choose our approach. I don't think that there's one right way. I think it's what works best for you, what works best for your child. There's kind of a gradual or casual training where we sort of introduce the concept of the toilet here and there. We sit on the toilet before bath time. We sit on the toilet as part of a diaper change. Just kind of no pressure and a lot of praise for if we have some success. So maybe we sit on the diaper, excuse me, sit on the toilet right before bath time. So we've taken the diaper off, we've stripped down, we're gonna have a bath or shower. Let's try sitting on the potty before we get in the bath. Okay, we sit on the potty, and maybe because the bath water is running, it gives us a little bit more of an urge to go. We might actually have some success going in the toilet. So even with a casual approach, I think we need to have some type of preparation of what are we going to do when they have success? How are we going to praise them or reward them if that's, the route we're going? Then the second option, there is the 3-day method, or sometimes it's called the flooding method, where you kind of stay home for 3 days, you offer a lot of liquids, and you have frequent trips to the toilet to try to catch them when they need to go. So we're trying to anticipate their need to go and get them to the toilet. We're going to the toilet. In this case, we're going to the toilet very often, like at least once an hour, if not more, in hopes that we catch them at the right time and that they're not having an accident. Um, the third approach, which is on our next slide, is more of a scheduled training approach. So we kind of so the 3-day method, um, oftentimes people will also leave the bottom half naked, or just kind of a little bit more free and easy to get to the toilet. Sometimes people just have no clothes, period. This is again personal choices. Winter time is a little tricky if you decide to use that method. I mean, most people's homes are warm, but it still can be a little chilly without, having clothes. So the scheduled training approach, we're going to dress in pants and underwear. We're going to have backups available. We're going to have the child pull their pants down and pull their pants up. And when I say pants, it's like whatever we're wearing on the bottom. If we're wearing skirts or shorts or whatever, just we're dressing, we are dressing in clothes, whatever that means. And then we're going to sit on the toilet every 30 minutes for at least 2 minutes. We might even consider using a visual timer so kids are starting to learn what 2 minutes means, how often they, or for how long they need to sit on the potty. They get a reward for sitting, like a small reward, and then a big, huge reward with specific praise for success. So, good job going potty, or way to go, you went pee, or like whatever words you're using, it's totally up to you. And then we're going to wash our hands. If we didn't have success, if we just sat there and we didn't have any success, that's totally fine. We're still going to go through the process of washing our hands, and then we're going to check their underwear like every 5 minutes or so for an accident or signs that they need to go. Um, if you are noticing, so let's say you took them on the 30-minute and they didn't have success, they sat there for 2 minutes, we praised them, we gave them their little tiny reward for sitting, and then we washed our hands and we went back to play. And then let's say in 5 to 7 minutes we check and they're still dry, and it looks like you are um they're just kind of doing their thing. And then maybe a couple minutes later, you start to notice the potty dance start to happen. And you might think, like, okay, it looks like you might need to go potty. Looks like your body's saying you need to go potty. Let's go sit on the potty. Even though it's not time yet, it's looking like you need to go. So then you might take them at that point hopefully you're right and they really do need to go and you have success, and then you can kind of start your 30 minutes over at that point. Um, it can be a little bit intense, a little bit overwhelming. Accidents will happen. Have them do as much of the cleanup as possible in the bathroom. So if they have an accident, oh, it looks like you know went pee pee, potty, poo poo, whatever, poop, pee, whatever you say. Um, or it looks like you're wet, or what. I'm not here to tell you what words to say, like, you can use whatever words you want. But it looks like you had an accident, or it looks like you went potty. Let's go in the bathroom and get you cleaned up, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to associate potty with the bathroom. We don't go potty in our pants, we go potty in the bathroom, and if we have an accident we need to clean up, let's try to get to the bathroom. Sometimes you need to, like, lay them down and clean them up that way, and that's fine, like, do what you need to do, but as much as possible we're trying to do that. We're also just remaining neutral and stating the facts. Oh, I see you're wet, let's go in the bathroom and help you get dry. So I can totally understand the frustration that occurs when we're having a lot of accidents, we're cleaning up a lot, and I can understand sometimes the motivation or I don't want to say motivation because that's the wrong word, but just kind of the, like, urge to, like, get mad at them or get frustrated because we feel frustrated. And the more that we can keep ourselves regulated and calm, the more our kids will they won't have a reaction to our reaction because we don't have a reaction. Hopefully that makes sense. Um, and that kind of goes along with some of the love and logic ideas. So in our next slide, we're going to kind of talk about this idea of empathy overpowers anger. So I know potty training sometimes can make us feel angry and frustrated for sure. And especially if this is not your first time attempting potty training. And I think that's one thing that is pretty common when we're potty training kids who might have a little bit of extra needs. We might have to try a few times. And it can be frustrating, and sometimes going into it, we're already worked up. So again, the more we can regulate ourselves, the better co-regulation we can have with our child. So if we find ourselves escalating and getting frustrated and getting angry with them, that co-regulation is going to happen, and in the way we don't want it to. So as we are escalating, we're going to bring our kids up with us. So if we can kind of keep ourselves calm, there's a lot more likelihood that our kids can stay calm as well. So potty training can be frustrating, as I said. Anger and negative emotion do not help at all, as we can all assume and imagine. Um, if we try punishment for accidents, it usually backfires. So I don't recommend punishments. Like I said, the natural consequence of assisting with cleanup, I think works well, but not punishment. Um, there is a quote that I have here at the bottom of the slide that I really like. The opposite of anger is not calmness, it's empathy. And I think sometimes in these moments, it's hard for us to be empathetic, especially as we have been using the toilet for many, many years ourselves. I think it's incredibly hard for us to relate to our children as they're trying to learn to use the toilet. So I like this quote as well. Empathy not only matters, it is the foundation of effective parenting. And I know that everybody is just doing the absolute very best they can when it comes to parenting your kids, and especially with extra needs and extra challenges. But I do really believe that the more we can have empathy towards our kids, the more co regulation we will have together, and the less emotion we will feel when it comes to potty training. I'm an incredibly emotional person, and my emotions can be like high or low. I mean, I can be just like totally fine and then, kind of crying the next minute, laughing the next. So I totally get the emotional aspect of potty training. But as much as possible, if we can keep the emotion out of it and try to have as much empathy as we can for the situation. And sometimes that empathy needs to be extended to our partner. Sometimes it needs to be extended to the child. Sometimes we are trying to have that co-regulation in hopes that they can give us empathy as well, as we're just trying to do the best we can to help them. So let's talk about some tips and tricks. So now we're like, okay, let's go. We're doing it. We're ready. We're starting. We've decided which method we're using. What are we going to do? Number one goes along with what I was just saying. Stay calm. As much as possible, stay calm. Take a break if you need to. Turn around, walk out, go in the other room, just do what you need to do to keep yourself calm. You are not in control, which is a real big bummer, but the truth. We cannot make kids toilet train. The more we try to power through it, we try to enforce things, the more they might withhold. And we don't want that. We do not want kids withholding any part of toileting. We want them to be able to allow their bodies to work in the way that they're supposed to. And so if we are trying to control them, they may control back by withholding. Once you start, give it a little bit of time before giving up. That being said, sometimes if it's not working, don't be afraid to wait a little longer until everyone is ready. As I mentioned before, especially in a population of kids who have those extra needs, sometimes we think we're all ready and we start it and we realize, actually, I don't think we're ready. Let's take a break from this. And I think it's fine and good to articulate that to our kids. Even if we don't necessarily think they understand us, I think it's okay to still say it. So let's talk next on the next slide about power struggles, what I was just sort of referring to. If you find yourself in a power struggle, get out. You're not going to win. I hate to tell you, but it's true. You're not going to win. So, how can we get out of the power struggle? Offer choices. If the child's refusing to sit on the potty, offer them some other choices. Sometimes we can give a, do you want to sit on the potty? Or do you want to skip your screen time today? Or I don't know, that's the first thing that came to mind. Let them have some control. For example, if you say it's time to sit on the potty and no, 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 no. Okay, your body will tell you when you're ready. We'll try again in a few minutes so that they do feel they have some control. Take a step back if you are feeling the need to kind of get out of that power struggle. If we can kind of just take a step back, recenter ourselves, then we might be more prepared to be able to help them. Okay, we're going to continue on with some more tips and tricks. We already talked about this one using the pull up over the underwear so they can feel the accident, but you have less of a mess. Daytime training may occur long before nighttime training is mastered. It's okay if kids are still needing some help at night or maybe even needing a diaper or a pull up at night. Depending, oftentimes boys can go a little longer before they're fully trained at night, but that's just kind of a stereotype. It's not always true. Fade out rewards as you can. Remember, we want to reward staying dry too, not just with the success of like having success on the potty, but also like, oh wow, you stayed dry this whole time. That's amazing. That's also something that we can reward. And then as time progresses, we want to kind of fade out those rewards so that we're just using the toilet on a regular, consistent basis without having to have those extra rewards. Boys can sit or stand. Sometimes it's easier if they sit. It kind of also depends on who else is using the toilet in your household and if other people are standing or sitting. If they're standing, a Cheerio can sometimes be a good target to help them to try to avoid as much messes as possible. Um, when they're sitting, I often like to have them sit backwards so they can hug the tank for a little more stability. And that's one way to kind of address the potty seat issue is if they sit backwards, they can hug the tank, they have a little more stability. They don't necessarily need like a potty seat, or they don't necessarily need to be able to hold on to the wall or even your hands or things like that. So, what are some, kind of takeaways to kind of wrap things up before we, kind of move into actually, I skipped a slide. You guys are on the right slide. I double clicked on my own device that I'm using over here. So, Before we wrap up, there's some more tricks. So, accidents are probable. Handle with minimal emotion and move on, as we've talked about. Keep it positive as much as possible. Keep the energy positive, keep the comments positive. I know this is easier said than done, but we're going to try our best. If flushing is scary, teach them that it is safe and okay to flush. If they love flushing, we only flush one time when we use the toilet. We don't need to have like, oh, this is turning into a game of flush the toilet, flush the toilet. Like it's gonna be okay, you can do it one time and then we're gonna be all done and we're gonna wash our hands or whatever you do. Um, use a visual schedule. These are some of the steps. Pull our pants down, sit on the toilet, use the toilet, flush, pants up, wash hands to help with kind of the sequence. Because we might have the kid climbing up on the toilet, but their pants are still pulled up. So we want to make sure we're doing it in the right order. And then sometimes we might need to do a little data tracking. Like, okay, let me think about the times I've sat them on the potty in the last 3 days. Have they had success? Have they stayed dry throughout the day and night? Like, those are some things we might want to measure. And these are all just sort of helpful tips and tricks. Of course, you don't have to do them all. Okay, now we're ready for some of the key takeaways that I was diving into a little too quickly. So make sure everyone is ready. If everyone's not ready, it's not time yet. Prepare before you start. I think that that is really critical. If we're not prepared, we're going to have a hard time. Give yourself adequate time. Like each time you do it, make sure you have enough time and the period of time. Remain calm and positive. We've talked about that quite a bit. Celebrate success. Success was sitting on the toilet, successfully going, staying dry. Those are all things that we can celebrate and reward. So that is all the things that I wanted to share. Sometimes I fly through this a little quicker than others. I think today I kind of, I don't know, talked faster or something, which leaves us a little more time for questions, which ultimately that's what people like to be able to, ask some questions about their individual child or circumstances. So we definitely have a solid amount of time for some questions today. So does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask or comments? It doesn't have to be questions.
I think the power struggle is one thing that I would like to hear a little bit more on because I've got a situation where my toddler won't, like, let's go sit on the potty. No, 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 no. And so that's something I want a little bit more information on because he shows all the signs. I think it's me. It's the problem.
Okay. And how old is your toddler?
He is going to be 4 in April.
Okay. So a good reasonable age to be noticing, okay, we're seeing all the other signs. Um, Sometimes I like to use choices as a way to let them feel like they're in control. So rather, and there's nothing wrong with saying, do you want to sit on the potty or telling them it's time to sit on the potty? Just sometimes we do get that pushback. So sometimes I like to give a choice of, do you want to sit on the potty before we play dinosaurs or after we play dinosaurs? Or do you want to have a snack before potty or after potty? So that it's like, I'm not giving you a choice about the potty, but you think I am because in general, I'm giving you a choice. So choices are my top go-to when we're facing a power struggle. I also like to think about what are the spots I can give you control. Do we have different potties in the house? Can we have a choice of, do you want to sit on the potty in your bathroom or do you want to sit on mommy's potty? Or, so that's where I like to, as the adult in the situation, like I'm still in control, but I'm making you kind of think you might have more control. Any thoughts on that specifically or for you or anybody else?
I just don't want to take up the time, but that was great advice. Thank you.
That's okay. Yeah, and one thing I forgot to say in the beginning is at the front of the PowerPoint, my contact information is listed. Email is probably the easiest way too, if you want to have a conversation about your particular, I mean, right now we have plenty of time to have conversations about individual kids, but if you're trying some stuff and it's not really working or you want to brainstorm a little bit more, you're welcome to send an email as well. I'm always happy to kind of brainstorm a little bit with you. Anybody else?
I have one.
Okay.
My daughter is 9. She has Down syndrome. And when you talk about the readiness, she hits maybe a couple points, but not many.
Okay.
So is it worth my time to even try starting if she doesn't have a lot of signs of readiness yet? Or
Yeah.
is this something that we should just wait until she shows more signs? Because it's going to be frustrating and hard. I know power struggles are going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm so glad you brought that up. And that's part of the point of this presentation, right? Because I mean, all of you have the internet. You can all go look on the internet about like what are the top potty training tips or whatever. And a lot of them are things that we talked about today. But when you start thinking about, okay, my daughter is not following the trajectory of the child development resources I find online, then what do I do? And I think like our hope in the at some point is that our kids will be completely independent with the toilet. And then we might start to think about situations where, I don't know if we're ever going to achieve 100% independence, but we might be able to have some toilet training without the 100% independence. And I mean, nobody needs to make a decision at, with even at 9 years old to say she's never going to be able to do it. That's, well, I don't know. I don't know if she's going to be able to or not, but I can't say never because 9 is still quite young. But one thing I also kind of like to think about in particular as kids are getting a little older than the ages where we would typically have assumed we might be able to do it is to kind of think about, okay, what are some areas we might be able to have some success with toileting? So is it we're able to, use a pull up or some type of diaper, but we're still trying to use the potty when we can. So again, that wouldn't be toilet trained, but we might be in sort of a long process of toilet training, and it might be very child led. Do you want to try using the potty today? Do you want to try sitting on the potty today? Um, and also kind of evaluating what her understanding is of the process of using the toilet. A lot of our kids are fairly familiar just because I mean, even if it's only the parent and the parent is using the toilet. So oftentimes kids are quite exposed to like the functional aspects of toilet training. They understand you sit on the potty, we flush the potty, we wash our hands, those types of things. Another thing that I didn't mention, and maybe as I revamp this maybe in the future or something, kind of thinking about what are some baby steps we could take. I talk about this with families, I just haven't included it in the PowerPoint. And one of the baby steps I like to take is to start moving all bathroom needs to the bathroom. So when we change the diaper, we change it in the bathroom. When we, like, not that we have to change our clothes in the bathroom necessarily, but we change the diaper in the bathroom. And then after we have the diaper change, we both wash our hands. It's quite common that the parent will wash their hands after changing the diaper, but we don't necessarily have the kids because the kids have been, passive, not necessarily actively participating in the diaper change. Again, sitting on the potty is another step that we can do. Um, Also kind of having the child while they're still in diapers kind of like, okay, we need to throw away your diaper. Let's start thinking about, and again, we don't have to do this, but just kind of like let's start thinking about putting your diaper in the bathroom garbage can, or if we have like a diaper genie type of situation, maybe we're going to start keeping it in the bathroom so that as we're talking about bathroom and potty needs, we're associating that with the bathroom. So I also think that you could give it a try and see, and maybe you have in the past and maybe you haven't. And like you said, she's showing some of the readiness signs, and kind of like, let's just try to see what happens if we try to use the potty a little bit more. And if it
Right.
really just goes awry and you're stressed or she's stressed, then we might like, oh, I thought maybe we would be ready, but maybe we're not ready. Maybe we'll try again later. So that again, we try as much as we can to take that pressure off. I know it's hard to do
Yeah.
that sometimes.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. I saw a couple things pop up in the chat, but I have to actually open the chat. So let me see. Let me just read through here. Um, Okay, one of them was somebody that wanted to speak with me directly. Sylvia did post my email in the chat as well, since you obviously can't scroll back to the top of the PowerPoint. So feel free to write that down. Okay, so we have a question. What if they refuse to do either, meaning you give them the choice of one versus two, and they still refuse? Do you just let them not sit on the potty that time, because I worry that would set the precedent that they can say no and I won't make them but can't force them? So what do you try next at that point? That is actually such a great question. um, when we're working with kids, me, whoever, who their cognitive development is on track, their language skills are on track. um, so this is very dependent on the child, if you think your child would understand what I'm about to say. But kind of giving them a little bit of autonomy and saying, your your body will tell you when it's time to go. If I see signs that your body is telling you, then we're going to go, kind of a thing. So, when you start to maybe see the potty dance, or you start to see them run and hide, or different signs like that, then we can say, I see your body is telling you. And if they're like, no, 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 I know it, we gotta stop and listen to our bodies. So we're also trying to train them to listen to their body, because ultimately that's how we get trained, is we listen to our body. And sometimes as adults, we're really bad at listening to our body. I'm sure I feel safe in assuming this, because as busy parents of children with Down syndrome or other needs, I can bet it happens to you too, where you are kind of doing something and you're like, "Oh man, I really need to go to the bathroom. I'm just going to keep doing. I need to hurry and finish this thing, or I can't go right now because of X, Y, or Z." And so we're like ignoring our bodies. So which happens, of course. But what we're trying to do is help our kids to listen to their bodies, and even maybe setting the example to them of, and even telling them, oh, my body's telling me I need to go potty right now, I'll be back in a minute. um so that we're also kind of pointing that out. It is such a good question about, do we force them to sit on the potty? Because once we get into that power struggle, we can get really, it can go really bad really fast. And so I would say that I would not probably force as much as possible. I would try what we can to motivate, to encourage. Remember, if you sit on the potty, I can give you a sticker. Or if you sit on the potty, you can choose out of the reward bucket. Or even like, okay, if you don't want to sit in the potty, if you don't want to sit on the potty, that's okay. But we're gonna go together. We're gonna stand in the bathroom. Just gonna stand in the bathroom for a minute, or come in here, just kind of trying to encourage and persuade them to get to the bathroom. And then you also asked if there's any correlation with potty training delays and Duchenne or muscular dystrophy, wondering if muscle weakness has anything to do with it. I would say yes, there likely is a correlation, which would also be relatable to our friends, a lot of our friends with Down syndrome, where they might have that lower muscle tone. Sometimes the physical ability to sit on the toilet can be impacted, as well as maybe just um, the muscle weakness when it comes to their bladder, bowel, sphincter, like all those different areas of the body, and it might be worth a chat with the doctor if you're feeling like that is something that's really being impacted. Um, I mean, I certainly know about muscular dystrophy, but not familiar enough to know specifically how potty training could potentially be impacted. But I do think that is a good consideration, something to kind of explore a little bit and see if, there's something that we can do to kind of help with that. Um, Let me see. I think that we've had success with understanding they need to go pee. So we'll go potty and pee a little, but not fully emptying the bladder. So we're going a little bit and then we end up with an accident when they fully relax. Any tips to fully emptying the bladder on the toilet? That's a great question as well. Um, and I would probably start with kind of oh, you started. Good job. We're going to sit here for a few minutes and kind of see if we can get them to kind of fully relax. If you're really noticing like, okay, we're just getting started, but we haven't fully relaxed our body enough to actually fully empty the bladder, then hopefully a little more time on the potty will cause that to happen. Um, there also is um sometimes people have suggested the tip of that, as I mentioned with the bath, turning on some water. So there's some water running in the room can sometimes help the body to kind of feel the need to go or start going. Another tip I've heard before is to take some warm water. So not hot, but not cold, warm to the degree that you think is the appropriate temperature, and kind of actually as they're sitting on the toilet kind of pour it on their body so that they sometimes that when that warm water hits their body, sometimes that makes them start to go more. So if that's something you're comfortable with trying, you could potentially try that to get them to fully empty the bladder. Another question: how long is too long to sit on the potty? That is a really good question as well. Probably depends on the child. Um, we typically recommend sitting for at least 5 minutes. Um, oh gosh, yeah, I feel like that's a great question because we don't want to just sit there and sit there and sit there. If you are pretty certain they need to go and they're just not going and they're fine sitting there, I might give it a few more minutes. But if you're starting to get some pushback or, kind of, I want to get off the potty, I'm done, I don't like this, I don't want this, then at that point we may start to, okay, let's sit here for one more minute. Let's sit here for 30 more seconds and then we can try again later. I know that's not a very clear answer, and partially because I don't know that I have a total solid answer on that. I wish I did. Yeah, it seems like this is kind of common where kids will kind of start going but they won't finish. So that that is certainly tricky because they're kind of getting the concept, but we still have some work to do. We have about 5 more minutes. Does anybody else have any questions they wanted? I don't see any more questions in the chat, but does anybody have any that they wanted either to chat or to unmute and ask? Or any comments as well. If anyone has any comments, that's totally fine.
I do have a question. So my son has Down syndrome, is 8. I was told a
Okay.
while ago when he was like 3 not to potty train him because he's not speaking. He's still
Uh-huh.
nonverbal.
Okay.
How do you recommend doing? Because like I've started doing it. Like I just go and take him to the toilet like every
Uh-huh.
30 minutes, and he sometimes will go, but it's like obviously he doesn't come and tell me because he doesn't know how to communicate it to me, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Or
Uh-huh.
he just is stubborn and doesn't care. I'm not sure. But what's like your
Yeah.
best advice? Like, because obviously I want to because I don't know if he'll ever talk. So I want to start doing something to try to get him. Do you have any advice on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Does he have any sort of sign language, gestures, pictures, any type of communication like that?
And we are working on sign language. I mean, he's not 100% nonverbal, but he will only pick and choose what he wants to say, which is not much. So, I
Okay.
mean, he's got some signs, but he'll do it if he really truly wants something like more or all done. I mean,
Okay.
those are his
Okay.
basic signs because he doesn't
Yeah.
want to do it.
Okay. I wonder if we could work on some type of sign or gesture specifically about the potty, or if we need to look at maybe using like a picture or something visual, um, so that we can start to give him a little bit more initiation about it. Whether that's like pointing to his diaper or patting like his leg or his bottom or his front, or just kind of some indicator. And right now where you are kind of in charge of it, maybe you could help him do the gesture to indicate we're going to the potty. And the toilet sign, like oftentimes we'll use the toilet sign for potty, but for one, from a fine motor perspective, it's a little tricky. And if he's not really using a lot of signs, there's probably not a high chance that potty is going to be his next sign that he picks up. Um, so that would be kind of my advice, is to try to find some type of way that would work for him to be able to communicate with you. Um, and maybe working with, if you've got a speech therapist that you're working with, maybe seeing if they have some suggestions, um, of something specific we could try. There are like different devices and different communication buttons and different things like that, that if we need to, we could also consider where maybe he pushes a button and that's his indicator that he needs or wants to. And if he's not initiating it for a while, we could be the one to initiate. Like we push the button and then, oh, it's potty time. And then we go. Um, can you see the recording after you'd like grandma and grandpa? Yes. Sylvia will get it posted here in the next little bit, and the recording will be available. And then, is there a window you can miss and make potty training harder? Oh, that is a great question. There's a potty training expert, and I can't remember the person's name. The method is called the oh crap method. And she is really, I've listened to some of her stuff, and you can tell she doesn't have any experience working with kids with special needs. And she's like very adamant that the window is like around 18 to 20 months. I can't say I 100% agree with her. I'm not disagreeing with her whole like professional, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for. Her whole professional personality is potty training. And so I'm not like, she knows what she's talking about. I think it can be different when we're dealing with that. I do think that there are times where it is like an ideal window to jump on. Like, for example, with my friend's little girl that I was sharing, she doesn't have any special needs or anything. She just turned 3. She's extremely verbal. So it's a completely different situation than a lot of what we're talking about here. But I think that's why my friend hopped on it the next day, because she was like, shoot, I don't want to miss this window. But I think if you miss it, you haven't lost it forever. I think that you'll still have opportunities later. Um, what are the top things not to do so we can avoid those? And we're right at 11, so I'll answer this question. I'll look at these next couple messages here really quickly, and then I'll wrap us up. But the top things that I would say to not do would be not to punish when there's accidents. And if you get upset with them, it's a very understandable thing that happens sometimes. Try to repair. Try to say, "I'm so sorry that I got frustrated, a little bit ago. I'm learning about potty training too. I'll try to, like, I'm trying to be better." So just like everything in life, we need to try our best to repair those times where we get a little more upset with our kids than we want to. The other thing that I say not to do is don't force it. If they're not ready, they're not going to do it. So even if we are really ready, if they're not ready, ultimately they have the control. And then I think, okay, and then tools and things besides charts, kids timers and other things they can set themselves. I don't know. I don't have like specific links or anything like that to share with you, but I think that is a great question. Things they could set themselves. I'm sure that there are some. I don't have any off the top of my head, but I that's something I could look a little more into. I love a visual timer as well, and a lot of times those are like an app on either an iPad or tablet or phone. Generally speaking, I'm not a huge, like, I don't recommend any type of screens in terms of like what I'm recommending, but I love a visual timer. So oftentimes it will just, if you're not familiar with visual timers, hop into your app store and look for a free one, or just do a quick Google search and see. But there's usually like a picture that appears, or a picture like something appears or disappears, and so they can kind of see it. They don't have to have any concept of time. It's kind of a similar concept to the hatch light, if any of you use those, where the light is a certain color indicating it's time to be awake in the morning. Something visual that they can see. I highly recommend visual timers. But other things, anything to make it kind of fun and exciting, books, stickers, treats, any like dollar store type stuff, spinny toys, little the kind of stuff that I don't typically recommend for like cognitive development. Push a button and something fun happens. Those I think are great potty toys. We are past our time, so I'm going to stop talking. I could easily ramble forever. I'm again super happy to answer your questions. If anybody didn't get your question answered and you want to shoot me an email, I'm so happy to do that. So thank you, Sylvia, for the opportunity to come and chat with you all again. And I wish you all lots of success and luck as you endeavor into toilet training.
Thank you so much, Aubrey. And thank you to everyone who came and attended today. We'll send the link out soon. Have a great day.